Hello and welcome to the Hub on CGTN. I'm Guan. According to the WHO, more than 4.5 million people have died worldwide from COVID-19. The interdependency of human beings, us, and our environmental health is becoming more evident. Now, most of the world's population live in cities, and that number is expected to rise to 68% by 2050. So, for city dwellers, how to live healthier, happier lives? To answer that question, the world's top scientists gathered at the International Science Council's meeting on urban health and well-being hosted by the Chinese Academy of Sciences, Xiamen. And we're very pleased to be able to get hold of some of them and invite them over to the Hub on CGTN today. They are Franz Gatzweiler, professor at the Institute of Urban Environment of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, Dr. Guan, science director from the Institute of Urban Environment, also at the Chinese Academy of Sciences. Philippa Holden Chapman is professor of public health at the University of Otago, New Zealand, and Carlos Dora is president of the International Society for Urban Health. Welcome to all of you. May I start with the question about COP26, which is obviously in the headlines and on people's mind. At the ongoing COP26 in Glasgow, the UK, there have been repeated calls from UN Secretary General, from Prime Ministers, Presidents, for meeting the goal of 1.5 degrees Celsius cap. Do you see that happening? Let me start with you, Philippa.
I think we've got a hard road ahead of us because we have to dramatically drop 50% of our carbon emissions really by 2030. And that means we have to take large steps, not incremental steps. And it's great to see China committing to be carbon neutral by 2050, because I think the big countries have got to show the way. But I also think that in the area that I work in housing and neighborhoods and cities, that there is a lot that we can do there in terms of making sure that we see the well-being of actually improving the indoor environment where we spend 90% of our time. And so that's making sure that we're heating in winter and cooling in summer, but we're doing it not through coal, but through renewable energy. We know that if we reduce the cars in our cities by congestion charging or making it like the British, that you can't buy fossil fuel vehicles after 2030, then people take public transport like rail, cycle, walk, and that has benefits for people's health and well-being. So if we can agree to work together and we can get the social license to do it both within countries, within cities, and between governments who see that we've got to have some global governments here if we're going to make that stop the world being an inferno.
Yeah. Franz, let me turn to you. How do you look at the pledges, the commitment made by the decision makers, policy makers at the ongoing COP26? I mean, how do you see the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal happening? Do you think that is still alive?
I think it's good to have a goal. Whether we can achieve the goal is a different question. And I may share the slight skepticism which Philippa expressed. But we know what needs to be done in order to reach that goal. And those are really dramatic changes which we need to engage in. We now live on a world with nearly 8 billion people and an additional 200,000 every day. That puts us a lot under pressure. We need to change our consumption behavior and arrange ourselves in a civilized manner, peacefully on a planet with many more people and less available space and resources. So I would say from the experiences we have with the Sustainable Development Goals, and which we also have difficulties in reaching, it's good to have a goal, and whether we reach it or not is a secondary, less important question, but we should do everything and make progress towards that goal.
Dr. Zhu, speaking of meeting climate change goals, there are many challenges from global geopolitics, political division, to domestic industrial lobby, to transparency. I mean, what do you identify as the main challenges and how do we really overcome them?
Thank you. Yeah, in this regard, I remain optimistic because China has recently committed to cap CO2 emission by 2030 and then achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. We have to work together in all aspects of our societal activities, from consumption to transportation. But from my own perspective, I'm a soil scientist. We know that the ecosystem is the largest reservoir for carbon dioxide. For example, soil lock up the most amount of carbon from the atmosphere. So if we can develop science and technologies to utilize the ecosystem to balance the carbon dioxide, the emission and the capturing, we can actually make contribution to the overall carbon neutrality of the society. And the scientists are also developing geotechnical innovations for carbon sequestration by all sorts of processes. Even people are thinking about accelerated rock weathering in the soil that can be used to capture carbon dioxide. And the ocean, of course, has a capacity as well. So I think it's a difficult task, but it's not unachievable if we all can act together and we all can share science and try to translate science and technology from the laboratories to everyday life, and we act together. I think it is possible that, and we must take actions together to achieve this battle against the climate change.
Dr. Carlos Dora, what do you think?
Well, I think that faced with the prospects of extinction, as we are facing, as we know that if we go much beyond this 1.5 degrees, that's what will happen to humans. I think humans will come up with solutions. And I do think that they start at the local level. They start with average citizens. I think what we've seen with adolescents, with youth, taking action, showing concern, and engaging in different forms of civil, sort of manifestation and of their concern. I think that's part of the starting to really resolve the issues, because until governments and businesses see the pressure and the need as really stark and important, and until citizens can realize what is it that on their behaviors they can do, like changing the diet, eating less meat, more plant-based diets, that has immediate benefits for individuals because less heart disease, less no other non-communicable disease, less hypertension, but also improves the climate. Or taking sustainable transport, cycling, walking to work, using public transport, or using clean energy. And collectively, in localities, in municipalities, I think people can create local solutions. And I think the COVID epidemic or pandemic has had this impact in people because people had to change their behaviors because of the virus. And that has created an experience that I would hope would be used to encourage a bolder and stronger response to other systemic risks. And the major one facing us is climate change. So cities, I think, and citizens have a very important part of the solution of increasing demand from governments and from businesses. And I do think that what youth has been doing in the last few years is very recent. I think can be spread around to other population groups and can improve the demands for cleaner solutions.
Local solutions are important and cities play a very important role. I think that's partly why the International Science Council is hosting this urban health and well-being program coinciding with COP26. But many of our audience may not be precisely familiar with this concept, right? What is urban health and well-being, and really what does that have to do with their lives? So from each and one of your vantage point, can you really share with us one or two aspects of urban health and well-being that's related to people's daily lives. Starting with you again, Filipa.
Thank you. Well, the thing about cities where increasing numbers of us live is that the carbon is locked into cities. So how we build our cities, how we design them, how their parks are close by and we don't have to get in our cars to go places is really important. And this idea of locking in carbon is important. And I think if we got rid of, for example, cement and steel for building our buildings and used other materials like engineered timber, for example, that means that we are actually building with much materials that lock in the carbon and means that our cities are actually helping to contribute to having a cleaner environment. So I think there's a lot of, in New Zealand where I come from, is actually profiled some of the passive houses that are being built by the big public health agency, which help to mean that our cities using less carbon intensive constructive materials. And I think that's a big change. And I was very pleased to see that there was an agreement that there was going to be no more deforestation. And I think that provides, it's a very, very good move, particularly as it involves Brazil. And I think that means that we can see trees not only as a way of absorbing carbon, but we can start forestry as a way of actually building materials rather than having to frack and make steel and use materials that production methods that use a lot of carbon. So I think I put less emphasis on geotech than Guan does, but I think so because many of the solutions are already with us. We just have to provide, have the right kind of institutions to really see this and plan for not just our generation, but the generations ahead.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want to wait to a magic solution.
Yeah, the building right is so important. I remember back in grad school, I took a course in ERE, Environment, Resources and Energy, and we showed models of how important it is to build the building right from scratch. France, you have been studying and advocating a systems approach regarding urban health and well-being. What exactly is a systems approach and why is that important?
Yes, I think urban health, the urban health community and the concept of urban health may have started off as trying to understand what makes healthy life in cities. But, there are obvious health benefits from living in cities, like living in good homes, well-heated homes in winter, eating healthy food, having access to transportation and breathing clean air and so on. We have a pretty good understanding of that kind of health in cities. But there are also other invisible factors like the urban microbiome or mental health in cities and other social determinants of health, which we are just starting to understand. But then if we go a step further towards this, what you mentioned, the systems approach, it is really understanding health more as an interdisciplinary and integrated concept. It's not just about human health in the urban environment, but it's also the health of the urban environment, the health of cities, and healthy environments.
So Dr. Zhu, let me go to you. You have been focusing on the study of soil and the environment, among other things. How important is it to really, have our soil clean, and how important is it to preserve the nature being, soil at the forefront?
Thank you. As France has just elaborated about the systems approach to health. So human health it relies on ecosystem health. And the goods and the services provided by the ecosystem is not just the ecosystem within the city, but also in the nature, in the countryside. So taking soil science as an example, the food we are consuming in the cities are all from the peri-urban and the rural regions. If the soil is contaminated, the food can also be contaminated. So we will ingest the contaminants. That is harmful to our health. And we are talking about the One Health. Soil is an integral part of One Health. If the soil is unhealthy, we need agrochemicals to cure it. And those agrochemicals may remain as a residue in the soil and then eventually will impact the ecosystem health and through the food chain influence our health. And if the plant is sick, again, we use agrochemicals. And these agrochemicals will remain partly in the food we are eating, and they will eventually affect our health. So I would say that systems approach is really to look at the entirety of the ecosystem, which will affect our health one way or another. They should be looked at integratively, and we should look at this connectedness of different components of the ecosystem, in which soil is a critical bridge in integrating all these components to ensure health and well-being in the cities.
Yeah, Dr.
And
Carlos.
I must say, I really
Philippa,
agree with Guan there. Guan then, I couldn't agree with you more. And in fact, one of the, you asked before about the businesses that do or don't support climate change in New Zealand. Of course, we produce lots of dairy and so forth, but we also use lots of fertilizers, and that's having an effect on our soil and also on our rivers. So, but the farmers keep on saying, oh, they'll wait till we get, a new technological solution. Some farmers are making changes, but most of them not. And the dairy price is going up, so they're doing very well.
Philippa, let me go back to you. You have conducted a number of high-profile randomized control trials, scientific research, into various aspects of housing and health. So tell us a bit about the main findings of your study. How important, what's the correlation of, adequate housing and urban dwellers' health?
That's a nice question. Thank you very much. So we've done studies working with the communities about insulating homes with insulation retrofitted after the homes have been built, and found that it lowers hospitalization and actually lowers the death of people in winter, especially older people. We've done studies showing that if you use renewable energy to heat or cool your house, that is also particularly good for the health of older people. And that if we design our houses differently, having handles on going down back steps and so forth, we can stop a lot of older people falling and having quite serious injuries. So we've done work like that, showing that the home can be improved quite dramatically, and it can have benefits for children not getting sick and having time off school, people not having to go into hospital because they've fallen and broken limbs. We've also done studies on putting in cycleways or walkways in communities and comparing cities that have them and cities that don't, and neighborhoods, and showing the improvements in people's health, and particularly good in that case for people who don't have much money but actually take to riding bicycles. So it's something that's not just improves the health of the people who are already well off. So those have been led to a lot of opportunities because we do it with the communities who spread the word, and the successive governments have taken up the idea. So it's a very large generation of employment. And we think that actually improving housing is about 20% of the consumption of carbon in many developed countries. So if you manage to build better houses or retrofit the houses and make public transport and walking and cycling a long way, that's 50% of the consumption of carbon. So the area that I worked in is very, very busy. And at the moment where the Crown Agency in New Zealand is building 18,000 houses in the next short while. So we're putting into practice, trying to build with engineered timber and it's very, very exciting, and making
Wow.
sure that where we choose the sites where they go, it has to be near public transport, and we're making the cities more compact rather than going out into green fields where there's been farming, and that stops, destroys the property out there by putting concrete and stuff on top. So I think science, when it's done in conjunction with the community, can be very powerful in providing a story that the government can buy, and it has a strong social license.
Yeah, those are truly important studies. Thanks for sharing that with our audience here today. Dr. Zhu, how much urban green space do city dwellers need to be healthy? And why is the connection to rural and suburban areas so important?
Oh, thank you. That's scientifically, it's a big question, because we still don't know how sufficient green space is sufficient for a healthy urban environment. But let us say that the more green space we can put into the urban environment and put it in the right pattern, and the connection of these green spaces within the city will definitely improve the general health of urban ecosystem and human health. And also, when we talk about people in the cities, probably 90% of our time is spent indoors. So the indoor environment, actually, it is an artificial ecosystem. We should also try to bring green space into the rooms. So we have plants in the room, then what plants we should put in, what soil we should use, and what kind of microbial community we should introduce to our living environment. Those are all challenging questions we are trying to answer. But in general, I think the scientific community is gaining a lot of data to support that the more green space we can bring to the cities, the much healthier the city is. And also, because people are all coming from the nature, we have our so-called old friends. These old friends are in the nature, the microbes. We can't see them, but they are everywhere. So if you visit like a green park, you will expose yourself to the natural microbial community. So you're likely to have a much healthier microbial community on your skin or even in your gut. And also by having healthy food, you will improve your microbial community in your gut. And we know now that the gut microbiome has some linkage with our brain, with our other organs in the body. So overall, I think we needed to get in touch with the nature again, because general urbanization has cut the human-nature contact greatly, but we should restore that. So there is a hypothesis that to rewire the urban, and that is something we need the science and the practice go hand in hand to have better city design. Thank you.
Get back in touch with nature sounds great to me. So, I'm a big fan of letting scientists speak on scientific matters instead of letting politicians speak about those issues. So it's a rare occasion to have all of you here today joining us on the Hub on CGTN. Any one last thought you want to share with our audience, starting maybe with you, Philippa?
I was just thinking about the microbiomes. Here we've got near where I live, right in the inner city. They've put a sanctuary of birds, and everybody agreed to plant trees in their gardens so that we have these flight paths that the birds can go and eat the berries off the trees and so forth. And so we now have, in the period that I've been here, several decades, we now have flocks and flocks of birds coming. And so you see, it's not just the microbiomes, it's the birds that are so beautiful, and especially those ones who are on migrations, who come all the way from Siberia back to New Zealand. So, and that seems to me like a nice, not just a metaphor, but actually a network of how we can see that what we do, providing trees and food, supports the birds.
That's a beautiful sight. Friends,
Yeah, maybe as a last thought, and with regards to our climate and ecological goals, I think we are really all in the same boat. And it comes when it comes to climate change, and we need to trust each other more and work together better. And science is here really delivering the knowledge we need for our planetary health condition. Personally, I think I believe in humanity and that we can achieve that. And one of the efforts we are currently proposing is to create a center for ecological civilization in response to those challenges. So knowledge about the ecological and climate crisis and the need for intercultural understanding really come together.
Thanks for that, friends. Carlos?
I think there's the human connection, the connection that we have with others is something very essential to our own well-being. In addition to linking with nature and getting engaged in transforming and improving your local environment with others who live in the same and share the same local environment, I think is one of the things that can help us move beyond the barriers of the transition to a greener economy. It's not all about the economy. It's not all about what's external, is also about the internal. We share more with our neighbors. We understood better where we live and the importance that has to our own health and to the health of others. So that idea of solidarity and building together a better future is something which is a key ingredient from moving towards a better model of development.
Thanks, Carlos. Dr. Zhu.
Cities are central to that.
My thought is that human is only part of the ecosystem. Even in the cities, in population-wise, human is the dominant species. We are still just one species of the ecosystem. To live in harmony with the ecosystem and to appreciate the goods and the services provided the ecosystem, I think it's of utmost importance, and we really should respect and to try to build the cities in conjunction with preserving the ecosystem and bring the nature into the cities.
All right, many thanks to all of you for joining us on The Hub on CGTN, and that would do it for this edition of The Hub. If you have any comments or suggestions on our show, feel free to get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for joining us. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing, and bye for now.